Welcome to Blue Compass, where we are talking about ways that you can speed up your website. Now, the speed at which your web pages load is obviously critically important, and it makes a big difference for your website visitors. The slower your web pages are loading, the more likely they are to leave and go elsewhere, hopefully not to your competitors' websites. But in addition to that, your web page load time also affects the search engine optimization of your pages. Google has been pretty clear that website load speed is one of their ranking factors. So here to discuss it with me today, I have Jay and Ben, and I'm going to dive right in and ask you, Jay, what are some of the things that you see that really slow down web pages, and what can we do about it?
One of the things that, this is going to be a confession from the digital marketers out here, one of the things that we are most susceptible to is we like to tag and link like everything and add these little scripts to things to track different elements, which is super valuable, but it does and can significantly decrease the speed of your pages.
Sure.
Things like Hotjar as a UX tool can really bog down your browser. Even having too many tags for things like your Facebook pixel, Google Analytics, GTM, you start layering these things on top of each other, and your browser has to make it through all these scripts as it's also trying to render a hopefully beautiful website. So that's a huge blocking process, depending on how those tags have been implemented. So that is our fault. We're sorry.
I appreciate you apologizing. That makes us feel better. We have seen that quite a bit, and sometimes we will take over the digital marketing for a website, and we'll jump in for the first time, and you look at some of the code, and there's like 50 different versions of Facebook pixel. There's all these bits of code in there, like you said, and that can really add up. And I feel like one thing we as marketers do sometimes is we'll say, oh, that'd be great to track this. Oh, we want to use remarketing on Google, and you put all this code in your website, but every time you put something on your website and it loads, it has to make a call to the server, and it just takes a little more time. So it's super important for us to keep tabs on all that code, on the plugins, on the tracking pixels that are on websites, and to remove them when they're not necessary.
And Google's even recognized this with their own analytics platform. Like GA4, it's introduced a lot more customization to the platform, but it's also introduced things like native events. And one of those native events is video tracking and scroll tracking, which were kind of complicated to do before in GTM, but they are also two very big factors in load, or they can be. If you have a lot of scroll animations or things that are based on scroll position on your site, and you also have that native GA4 scroll tracking implemented, it can really bog down load time on the site. Or if you have lazy loading elements, it can also bog down some of those things potentially. So that's something that if we are running into that issue, we'll toggle it off, because while it is valuable to have, it's more valuable to have your page load quickly and efficiently.
Absolutely. Ben, what about you? What are some things, from a developer's perspective that you see when you're looking at different websites that really bog down the experience?
I would say it's a combination of some things that users can control that are using their website, and the developers for them. So on the user side, it would be images, properly resizing images, compressing them for the web. That's a huge one. That's the majority of why a page is slow, is those huge images. People forget, and they assume because their internet is fast and the page loads quickly that everyone's does. Well, that's not the case, especially on mobile devices.
Yeah.
Mobile devices don't have the processing power that desktops do, so they struggle a bit more even if their internet is pretty fast. That's a struggle. Another one is a lot of third-party embeds like YouTube or forms. Over time, form embeds have gotten better, but if you put a ton of those on a page, it really doesn't matter unless you have a custom loading solution. You're going to really bog that page down. On the developing side of things, it would be the overall way scripts are loaded. There's a thing called render blocking, where when a browser first tries to load a page, it looks at all the resources that it needs to load, and there are certain ones that will prevent the browser from doing other things. If you can change the way that those important scripts load to load asynchronously, to load and let the browser do other things like download the content, the images, that's really big. So it's definitely a combination of factors. Also with Google Analytics tracking, like Google always hasn't been the best at following their own advice as far as asynchronously loading things.
Right.
But that has gotten better over time. So it's really kind of a three-pronged thing. But yeah, for users, by far and away, images, like those are a big deal. If I go to a page and I see a page is slow, like 90% of the time it's because somebody put like a 20 megapixel image and they didn't resize it or compress it at all. And it's a big issue.
How big should a image be ideally on a web page when it comes to the file size?
It varies on where it is on the page and what, if it's like the header, is it the main image, the hero image of the page, or is it just a small, a side type of image? Even for the large header image, we typically shoot for, like on a large desktop, it compresses down to around 150 kilobytes, like at maximum. And there are other solutions, advanced technologies where you can let the browser choose which size of an image to download, but that's more on the developer side of things.
Yeah. And there are a lot of great tools out there now too to compress images. It can be a tedious process, like re-uploading them to whatever media library you're using, but the value you're going to get out of that 2 minutes that you spend per picture to re-upload is going to be huge, especially if it's with CWV, largest contentful paint is such a big factor, and usually your largest contentful paint is like a hero image or something along those lines. So by compressing that image, you're taking a third or a quarter of your CWV score and really shoring that up in a really simple way. So I think that's right on point. And I think the same thing is true of like forms and things. There's a lot of really great tools out there. Some of the dated ones are not going to be as efficient, and some of the ones that have been really on top of technology are going to be a little better.
And the nice thing about, you're right, images may be the number one thing that bog down web pages, but the nice thing about it is you don't have to be a developer, you don't have to be super technical to be able to fix that. You can go to an image and you can download it, and you can look at, right click on it and figure out how big it is, try to get it under 100 kilobytes. In your content management system, you might be able to click and see this file size. But yeah, using Photoshop or TinyPing or another tool, like most people who are fairly tech savvy, marketers, business owners can compress those images and make them better. So that's the good news.
For sure. Yeah, and you had mentioned like file size before, and I should have piggybacked on this, but so 150 is a really good number, especially for that largest contentful paint. Our general SEO best practice when we're running audits is 100 for average image content. So that would be kind of what we would be shooting for throughout most of the site as a number.
Yeah. In general, overall page size, total page size, I like to hit 1.5 megs or less. Over time, that the average internet page size, it keeps increasing, but that doesn't mean we should lower our standards. And we always shoot for that 1.5. Certain templates, like your homepage or certain very special pages, obviously are going to have more media and more things on them. So there's only so much. There are some efficiencies you can do, like not only loading certain images that are in view, some technologies like that. But you will see some pages go over that 1.5 limit, but it's just kind of a trade-off on how valuable is this page. Are you adding a lot of value to the user? If your page does take a little bit longer to load, sometimes that makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. It's just it just can vary.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of to get back to like the technology, and this would be a very advanced thing, and we touched on it earlier, but lazy loading is a super valuable part of this process.
And what is that?
And lazy loading is when content isn't rendered or fully generated on the page until you actually scroll into its position. So that allows the content to still have a really good user experience and show up when it's needed, but it's not showing when it's not necessary to be there. And another really valuable thing that we're starting to see pop up on sites is pre-rendering of content. So when a link is present on a site, the site can start rendering or start generating some of the content on the back end of that link, so that when you click on it, it loads much more quickly for the user. That's not going to have as much value to a search engine because it's just crawling through the site. It's not waiting for it to render in most situations. But for the user, that can be really valuable, and it's going to increase the number of pages they visit. It's going to increase how engaged they are with the site and just their overall experience with the brand. So that's another cool technology that we're starting to see more and more of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it certainly is a ranking factor too when it comes to search engine optimization. So in other words, in most cases, if your web page is very similar to a competitor's, the content, everything is generally pretty similar experience, but yours loads faster and theirs loads slower, you will rank higher than theirs. And of course, there's so many factors, but that bodes better for your web page. So it is a great ranking factor. And again, visitors might just leave and go to your competitor's site if it takes a while for yours to load. But at the same time, we have seen web pages that don't have the best load times rank really well too. I feel like it's just totally a balancing act, Embedding a YouTube video, is that going to be a great experience for your visitors? Is it going to add more to the experience? If so, do it. If not, if you're questioning it, maybe not, because that's going to add to the load time. So the whole thing's just a balancing act.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people do these things for the right reasons. Like you add a bunch of content, you add images, you're adding video embeds, and all of that makes a lot of sense depending on the content, but maybe it doesn't make sense to have all of it in one piece of content. And the one thing I really value with page speed and just CWB as a whole from Google is they've finally given us a bit of a roadmap. Like they've given us some direction about this is what we care about. And they've given us some thinly veiled ideas on things with SEO before, like having a meta title, having a meta description. But with page load, they've said very clearly, this matters. You need to care about this, or else you're going to have trouble in the future ranking for this content. So take that and take advantage of that, because we haven't had that always.
One type of image I never compress, and the highest quality possible is Ben's hat image, because on our website we have a full gallery of your many impressive hats.
Yeah, it's important to have that full
resolution. The full quality, it doesn't matter if it takes 20 minutes to load. The pristine quality of your hats is very important.
Have we set up our referral partnership with
not yet. I'm losing dollars every
second.
second.
It's going to be a huge traffic and revenue generator. I'm pretty sure about it.
Yeah, I hear it's a big deal, these referral programs. So there you go.
That's the web for you.
Well, if we can help you with your website, improving the load times with search engine optimization, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We would love to give you a hand. Thanks, and we'll talk to you next time.